right, everyone, welcome to the 29th episode of the Bauer Hour. I am here with a repeat customer because one episode was not enough. The throwback from episode 5, Max Rosenfeld. Welcome to the show, man.
Hey, awesome to be here.
I know, man. We're jumping into some middle split stuff, but just to give people some background on who you are a black belt holder in martial arts, also a bodyweight and gymnastics strength guy, flexibility, hand balancing, and a little bit of tricking and freeriding thrown in there. So you're pretty much a better version of me, dude.
Yeah, I did martial arts, mostly karate for like over a decade. I had a lot of experience there, and I just started branching out into gymnastics and tricking, all those fun flips and stuff. So that's what I've been doing in my time.
Just getting hooked from there. And you've recently started a thing called the Amateur Acrobat. Go ahead and fill us in about what that is.
Yeah. I feel like the past couple of years I really accumulated a lot of information, and I feel like I went through all this crap, and I was like, and now I feel like I have a lot of people that I can help. So, I made this website called Amateur Acrobat. Kind of reflects me a little bit. And, I'm just starting to mess around with it, put some content on there, and hopefully, people will find it helpful. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Yeah.
Cool, man. And you're also on Instagram as at Maximilian Rosenfeld.
Yeah. We'll spell it. You'll see it on the site.
We'll throw it in the description just to make sure everyone gets the right one. So yeah, man, good for you. The whole branding process. I've actually talked about that a lot on this podcast before, but good thing you're doing that, especially doing it young and also sticking with it. So for those listeners that are interested, I think Max, you do some online coaching a little bit.
Yeah. I'm definitely gonna put that part on the website yet. I haven't gotten it up there, but I'm gonna implement that pretty soon. So.
Cool, man. Yeah, he's got some great stuff. You're actually working with a few people here, and they're getting cool results, and you're working with me a little bit, so I'm getting results too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun stuff. It's fulfilling, yeah.
Exactly, man. Cool. Well, today's episode is going to be all about the middle split. I think you got me into the middle split a little bit. I mean, I've always been interested in it, but I mean, I've never really thought that I'd ever be even capable of where I am now. So before we get into this stuff, let's just dive into the why. So I'm going to ask you, why are you so interested in middle split training?
Well, middle split was one of those themes that stuck with me from my martial art days. In karate, like things like the side kick, the roundhouse kick. Like for that you need your splits if you really want those higher kicks. And for the longest time I had no idea, couldn't figure it out. And over time I figured it out through trial and error. But it's important for a variety of reasons. If you're like a gymnastics bodyweight enthusiast, straddle planche, front lever, those progressions, your straddle flexibility is important for that. So that's probably one of the biggest reasons. Other reasons might include like your hip health, it's just, it feels a lot better to have that range of motion just in general. I
agree. And that's one of the things that bothered me too, is once I'm getting into this flexibility stuff, I hate being tight and I just can't stand the feeling of being restricted.
Yeah.
And it just bothers me so much to know that I haven't been flexibility training, just because I would have been able to get so much further along. But I mean, just have to take it with a grain of salt. But a few other things. I am kind of on the way. I'm not on the way out of a gymnastics career, but I was pretty involved in it in college. And my mobility, I didn't know that it held me back as much as it did. One kind of funny example: my shoulders are really tight, so I swam in high school, and then I just picked up gymnastics and I was swinging on rings. And every day it was just so painful, and it was just ridiculous. I didn't realize how tight my shoulders were until 5 years after starting. And then now, swinging is a whole lot less painful. So, I mean, mobility in that sense, that's not exactly a middle split thing, but working on things like flares or pommel horse,
totally.
it can get you so much further just by having a middle split. And it's just cool, and if you get into a good habit of building flexibility into your movement routine, you can get a whole lot of cool gains here. So I think that's why I do it, that's why Max does it, and we're going to explain to those listeners now what we do. So Max, do you want to kick off with some warm-up action?
Some warm-up action. Ido Portal definitely popularized the horse stance, the Mabu. That's something I did a lot in martial arts as well. I think that's actually a really good warm-up tool. I don't really use it extensively to open up the hips necessarily, but I'll do it before I do my middle splits. Like I'll get in the position and my hips will be like, whoa, they'll open up, and I usually use that. It's definitely good to warm up your knees beforehand because it can kind of be stressful on your knees. That just, typical like squat position. just kind of moving around in there. It's really not a whole lot of like minor stretches. It's more like warming up your joints and your hips and everything.
And that's because it is so stressful on your joints. There is such an intense stress on your knees when you're in these positions. Yeah. We're actually going to be covering this later in the episode, but it can be pretty injury prone if you're not careful.
Yeah.
So particularly warming up these big joints will greatly facilitate in warming up.
Mm-hmm. And also your setup actually has a big impact on that, but I guess I'll mention that later. Yeah.
Okay. Some things for me, I don't know why, I like to stretch my glutes on this day. I have 2 flexibility days, so I do a lot of hamstring work on one, hamstring and hip flexor. And then middle split days, it's obviously middle split, then glute work just to facilitate that because my hips are super tight. Yeah. But few things here, it's just simple pigeon stuff, so a lot of yoga poses. I have 2 or 3 other positions that you guys have probably just find online. And for my hips, obviously the horse stance is great. For those listeners that aren't familiar with it, it's essentially a wide stance with your feet parallel, and you can kind of play with your hips a little bit and just doing different kind of up and down movements, moving through different positions. That helps me a lot. And a few other cool things. I do a butterfly pose. So it's very simple. So, sitting upright on your butt, feet together, and then I'll weight that. So I will have these 30-pound weights, and I will put these on my knees and just get my knees just pushed down. And if I don't do that before my middle split training, it's pretty unbearable. So that's one for me. I'd highly recommend that one.
Yeah, that's definitely good for people that don't have that mobility yet. I think the butterfly was something I gained a lot easier through middle split training. Like it had carryover from the middle split. So
exactly,
yeah, it's definitely related.
Yeah, and if you're not quite there, then go with the weighting.
Yeah,
but also be careful.
Also be careful, definitely.
With loading.
Yeah.
So cool, man. And then once we're warmed up, what is kind of the next thing that you do?
Next thing you do, well, usually I will just kind of, I'll sit down kind of like pancake position, and I'll just sort of move through that to actually start stretching the muscles a little bit before I go full on, like, my sets and reps.
Right.
And yeah, that'll just involve, sitting on my butt, getting my legs as wide as possible and just kind of moving through. Maybe it helps to actually move your torso through the different ranges. So, try and get if you're going for your left foot, get your left shoulder to the ground, that kind of thing. It helps open up kind of like the gracilis and adductors. That's usually what I do. Just kind of start giving the muscles some stimulation.
Yeah, I do the same thing, man. I do a lot of that sort of stuff. I don't do as much pancake on these days just because I throw more of that on my hamstring days because that's a little bit tighter for me. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's just mostly sitting in horse stance. I normally sit there for a minute, and then after that minute is up, I'll straighten my knees, kind of lift up and kind of sink into a very gentle just position and kind of feel it out. So I'm kind of squeezing my legs together, and it's just kind of that little tension against the ground that warms up all of my hips, and it makes the following sets a lot better.
Yeah, definitely. Once the muscles are warmer, they respond better to.
Yeah, it's true. And actually, just kind of an aside, I train in pants. I don't know what kind of clothes you wear when you do this stuff, but I love when my knees are warm. I love when my hips are warm. I don't know. What do you wear?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm feeling the short shorts. I'll get some really promiscuous shorts on. Other days I'll use just sweatpants. It really depends for me, but yeah, the sweatpants definitely help keep it warm, and it kind of helps you have a nicer, longer session.
I agree. And sometimes I do this crazy thing too where I take a warm shower before. So just the way my night schedule falls, I exercise, I eat, then I'll shower. After I'm showered really warm, I'll just throw my pants on and just bust it. And I've found that those sessions, they're a little more intense because you're sweating and stuff like that, but also just having that internal warm temperature can easily help you sink down a little bit.
Yeah. Part of the middle split training, it's a really simple formula. It's basically, the wider your legs are, the more intense it's going to be. And so, like, if I can relate back to my martial art days, after class, we'll have like sparred for like a good hour or half hour. It'll just be pouring sweat, and like you'll do your stretching, and it's just insanely easy. Your muscles are so warm. You can go much farther down, and when you can go farther down, it's technically a bigger stretch. So that can actually be really effective in
Yeah, we
your
used
loaded
to do cool
stretching.
down stretches all the time, and I loved it just because the same thing you said, you can get so deep in just a ridiculous range. It's a range you would never
Right.
even, it feels like I'd never be able to be in that position. It's just, oh,
And
so
once like
good.
you can get there, you can apply like the loaded stretching more effectively because
Mhm.
you're farther down. So yeah,
Right.
definitely good tool, but you can't always do that. So which is okay. It
Yeah.
totally works without.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I mean, actually, one thing, when I was in Pittsburgh, they did hot yoga, and well, I almost died in that
Oh
thing,
God.
but
Yeah, I've
it was
heard.
90 minutes, and I was just so loose after that, and it felt so good. Granted, I mean, I was just had to sit there and drink water because I was about, to pass out from
Oh yeah.
dehydration. But everyone in that was just so loose, and it was just an entirely new position. So I definitely recommend getting warm. But like Max alluded to, you don't need to do it all the time, but you can also incorporate that sort of variation in to get those different ranges of motion. And we're actually going to be talking about variation a little bit. But let's talk in about these sets and reps. What kind of stuff are you doing?
So, there's a few different schools of thought in terms of stretching. If you're
Mhm.
going loaded stretching in terms of middle split, that's, isometric stretching. And, after you're warmed up a little bit, you're not going to, tear any tendons or anything like that.
Right.
There's a whole spectrum of things, but if
Mhm.
we're talking loaded stretching, that's you want to build as much strength as possible in those muscles, right? And supposedly that helps your nervous system, allow you more range. So if you want to build more strength, that's something more like for reps, that's something more like 20 seconds around there. That's usually what I do. I've always done like 20
Mhm.
to 30 seconds. It's a good range. That's more relative strength. But yeah, I would use 20 seconds in your reps. It's a good general starting point. Something
Mhm.
like 5 sets by 20 seconds is probably a good starting point. Depending, on your physiology, you might want to change it up a bit, see how you
Yeah.
respond. But I think that's actually a good place to start. Yeah, and you're going to need some rest time in between those sets, definitely, because
It's
it's
intense.
intense.
I think I take about 2 minutes, between 2 to 3 minutes, depending on what I'm
Yeah.
doing. There's also a feeling you get when you're in this middle split, when you start getting deeper and it gets more intense, you pretty much start shaking, and
Yeah.
you hold it, and then you're just kind of shaking that last breath in. You're like, all right, 5, 4, 3, and then on one, you just kind of have to collapse because it is really intense pain. So what I do, I also kind of like pop my hips back into place. So I kind of do, instead of a ass to grass squat with my knees out, I like doing that with knees in, and that kind of
Yeah.
it's kind
Right,
of an
right.
internal
Because
rotation of the
yeah,
hips,
because
and that's
yeah, yeah. No,
go
that's
ahead.
totally yeah. No, you're doing the middle split. Your hips are under that intense load. When you do that internal rotation, it definitely helps relieve that.
Exactly.
It would be like if you stretched your hamstring and then you sat in a squat. Like your hamstring is much shorter. It's relief. It's really important
Yeah,
stuff to do.
and that's
Um,
just one way to unload it. Typically, well, I do that internal rotation of the hips, however you want to do it, and then I kind of walk around. And after you walk off a little bit, you're gonna feel entirely different. You're gonna feel a little.
oh
There's a point where
yeah,
you feel good,
yeah.
and then after that, you can go again. So I wouldn't recommend doing minute rest intervals. So I mean, if you are in a time crunch, maybe don't train middle split because you are gonna like recovery time is precious. I
Yeah.
mean, you could easily damage yourself if you're kind of going a little too quick with it.
Yeah, and it's really intense on your nervous system. You'll like for me, I don't respond to like really intense stimuli very well. So doing like a couple sets of that, I'll want to like fall asleep, like while I'm doing the middle split training. So
Right.
yeah, the rest is pretty important if you're gonna commit to that.
Hmm. I agree. And then I built up, I mean, I started 20 seconds. Well, there are a variety of things that I do. And actually, this will tie really well into our next point, which is progressive overload, which essentially states that you kind of want to either load yourself or do something more advanced. So you're not just doing the same reps in the same position
Hmm.
for time. I mean, it might get you there eventually, but if you incorporated a little higher intensity followed by a little lower volume, you could be making more gains. But for me, it's just, I used to have to be barefoot because it used to be too
Right.
intense. And then once that got comfortable, I mean, this is actually, maybe a few month and a half later, then I could finally go to socks. And then that made it more intense, but I couldn't hold it as long. And then
Hmm.
you build up your volume there.
Hmm.
And then now I'm doing weighted stretching. and I'm actually pretty low. But it's the whole concept of get comfortable, push yourself, and then just do something more intense, and then push yourself again. You just keep building that up, and ultimately that's going to land you there.
Exactly. That's how you break those plateaus. I mean, I see a lot of examples of people that have that problem, train their middle split in CrossFit gyms, and I wrote a whole article on it on my website. But
check it out real quick.
Yeah, check it out.
Low-key plug.
But basically, if you're stretching in that kind of environment, you got your like rubber kind of type floors, and you're wearing shoes. You can't slide down into your middle split. You're going to be stuck at one point. So when I see people do that, their sets and reps might look something like, a few sets, and it'll be like minute holds of like the middle split. I've seen that plenty of times before, and you'll hit a plateau that way. Definitely, you're not going to adapt to the next level of intensity. I have another example of a guy who I gave some advice to in his middle split. His name is Ron Reutman. I think he's in Israel. But, he's been working on his middle split for a while, really tight guy. And, he was training in a gym type of environment. And, he saw one of my videos where I was getting in my middle split, and I was just kind of wiggling my feet around to get that extra little bit of range. And he was like, hey, like, what's up with that? And, apparently it made all the difference for him. He tried to get that extra little bit of intensity. He was wearing socks, and, he said, he got like a few more inches down, like immediately. And it's going to be a lot more intense, but that's what he's going to have to get used to now. So yeah, that progressive overload, just adjusting, and the different variations, something as simple as wearing socks over carpet, can
exactly
be a really big deal, actually. It sounds silly, but really it is a pretty big deal. That's why I wrote a whole article on it. Yeah.
Actually, I read that article. It was a good one. But it's just, there's so much more friction when you have your sweaty ass foot sitting on there as opposed to sock sliding. And like I said, it took me about a month and a half to just build up in barefoot before I could do that. And then I was finally comfortable with that. What other variations have you experimented with?
There's obviously the most direct thing would be adding weight. So, I have a bunch of kettlebells lying around. And in the past, if I've hit plateaus, I've use socks mostly, so if I hit a plateau, I'm wearing socks. I'll add like anywhere from 15 to 35 or even 45 pounds, which is pretty ridiculous. I don't recommend doing that, but sometimes it did give me a little bit of that extra push that I needed to break past and get to that new level of intensity. 15 pounds I think is pretty okay to add. That's what I did, and I eventually got my middle split that way, but that's something I had to do on and off. It wasn't something I could do all the time because it was, I said, really intense. Yeah. That's
interesting. I know that every time I do it, I have to wait, but I kind of build up to it. So I will do just unweighted for a little bit, and then I'll hit my weighted sets. And then at the end yesterday, I was just threw on one of these 30-pound things, and I got really low after that. But that was after 4 or 5 sets.
Yeah. I mean, it's painful. That's the reality of it, but it does. Your body will adapt to that. New level of stress. So
I agree. What I do personally, I have these little ankle weights. I throw them over my shoulders actually, so I can just keep focusing on keeping my hands out, and not really touching. So exactly. And actually, man, I have this weight vest in my car that I've been meaning to try out.
Oh.
So that one goes up to 40 pounds, but I mean, I don't need to have all the bags in there, but you can pretty much do whatever you want, and it's weight in the back, weight in the front, so it's going to keep you balanced. So I'm probably going to start experimenting with that once these 10
That's definitely a good tool to use for lots of stuff.
Exactly. Let's see, a few other things I've done. I've actually kind of put my butt against a 90-degree wall with ankle weights on, and I just kind of like scrunch myself all the way up. And I just sit on my phone, and then my legs will just stretch by themselves, and you just kind of let gravity take over. And you can kind of hold that indefinitely. I mean, you're not going to get mind-blowing gains, but it's also a good way to just, work, kind of not focus on it. You get some, easy gains just not by doing any work.
Yeah, it's a good way to, I've used that before, and it's just kind of a good way to like sort of, come down from
I agree. I've actually seen you do that with elastic before, right?
Yeah.
So you're like on your back. Yeah, the kick you stretch ever, whatever you said.
It does look pretty funny, but that kind of ties into the next thing, letting your training evolve a little bit, and specifically for the middle split. At first, when I did martial arts and stuff, I had no idea what I was doing. I would just do regular stretching. Eventually, I figured out isometric stretching was a really good way to do it for me. And so, once I got to the point where I could do the middle split, get ass to the grass, balls to the ground, once I actually got to that point, you want to solidify it a little bit more than that, so you can consistently get into that range. And I can consistently get into it. It's still painful. It's not perfect, but I think that once you sort of break through that like initial just tightness, it's like embedded into your like genetics almost. Once you break through that, you can evolve your training a little bit. And what I mean by that is, instead of always doing isometric stretching, kind of making like a strength workout, you can start to actually, stretch just for the enjoyment of stretching. And also it starts to actually give you more gains than not. I know this to be true because, after I got my middle split, I'll have sessions where I won't specifically do loaded stretching, and I'll just be like, I'll just go down, I'll just stretch in it. It'll still be intense, but I'm not thinking loaded stretching. I'm thinking just open up,
Exactly.
Instead of like contractions, PNF, that kind of stuff. Your body can evolve and your training will evolve as you break past certain benchmarks.
Yeah, I agree. I think you need to take your body to a point. So once you can get to the whole sock realm, then you have a lot more experimenting to do. You can have a lot more fun with it. But yeah, it's just, I remember it was just I remember asking myself, why am I like doing this? This is just brutal. Yeah. This isn't fun. But then after you get to a certain point, it becomes a lot more fun. You have a lot more variations with it, and you start seeing results, and you start seeing them faster. So
actually,
that's really
one
great.
important variation I just remembered is the straddle up. You get to a certain point in the middle split, and you can start hitting straddle ups. It's pretty fun, and it makes you realize like, wow, I'm progressing. Like, this is awesome. Yeah, it's one of those great benchmarks.
It's kind of a tangible goal, and it's kind of tough to measure middle split because, if you're an analytical trainer, you're going to be measuring things, but it's kind of, you don't want to take a picture and then put a protractor up to the screen and say, okay, today it was at 17 and a half. Yeah. But it's just, that's a solid skill that means, okay, I'm on the home stretch.
And it's different for everyone. You could have more pancake flexibility, and that could be what's given it to you. You could have more middle split flexibility, that could be what's given it to you. But either way, it's a big confidence booster, and it'll keep you motivated for sure.
Exactly. And doing the same thing over and over again, I've found with pretty much anything, you're going to get burnt out. So honestly, it is good to incorporate some degree of variation in whatever you do. I think one thing we haven't touched on yet is frequency.
Oh, frequency.
Me personally, I stretch. My total stretching, I do that anywhere from 4 to 6 times a week, depending on what I'm doing, but half of those days are going to be dedicated to middle split. The other half is going to be for hamstring flexibility. It works for me. I know that stretching every day for me, I tried it, and it's just, I can't commit that much time to just one thing. I got, all this other shit going on, but I found better results by actually resting in between. So I take a day in between, maybe even 2 days in between. And then when I do that next session, I can get into it and not be sore. And one thing we haven't actually touched on yet is you're probably going to be a little bit sore after you do this.
Definitely.
Middle split, maybe, but yeah, it's definitely the hamstring. If you really start killing hamstrings, you're going to be sore the next day. And you can kind of carry that in the middle split as well. Take some time off. For me personally, I don't know, have you experimented with stretching every day?
Yeah, I have. That kind of thing. I've gone both ways where I've done a frequency of every 5 days, and I've done, every day. I definitely agree with you that the rest is really important, because the times that I've done it, frequency of every 5 days, I'll be, totally recovered. I'll get back into it. And I was like, bam, wow, that new range is there. If you're stretching every day, especially if you're a naturally tight guy, I feel like you're going to wake up very tight every morning.
Yes.
And so you might have to regulate that by having more intense and less intense days. But you just got to find out what works for you,
Yeah. And honestly, it could be a little bit of both. If you do maybe 1 month of low frequency, 1 month of, there isn't one way to get everything. Even in just the world of strength training, bodyweight training, people like to say that there's a single method to do everything, but I don't think that's the case. And honestly, once you have these tools, just start playing with it. And we already mentioned this before, but that variation is going to get you where you want to go. And just a quick aside, I didn't stretch for the last 6 days maybe. I was just on vacation, maybe even longer than that, maybe 7 days. And then I just did middle split yesterday, and I was so much lower
Oh yeah,
than where I was
that's
before.
awesome.
So, I mean, it could be the high frequency with time off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you kind of have to let these rewards come to you a little bit too. So,
Yeah, you know,
yep.
one other point is how like permanent this stuff is. You know, once you make that progress, you're gonna keep it because
Right.
you know I've gone months without doing any middle split stretching, and you know
I saw
I'll still
that.
be able to get down all the way.
Yeah,
And
that was
it's
crazy.
pretty awesome. But yeah, that's just another thing to keep in mind.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a cool post, man. I know you didn't do it for about, like you said, just a month, and then all of a sudden you had it back.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy.
Yeah, there's
Cool.
you know there's rest and then there's like time off, but it's still
Exactly.
permanent.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about injuries. This is our last point. I know I've had a lot of, well, not a lot of, I've had maybe 2 cases of injuries where I couldn't train it for about a month. First time was just before I was wearing socks. The whole foot thing, it just sucked and my hips weren't ready
Yeah.
for it. But I think I tried to get too good too fast, and then my hips kind of rejected that.
Mm-hmm.
And that was before I could really start loading it down, and I was into loading. So my hips hated it. And then the second thing was I got knee pain on my left leg. So I don't know the exact technical term, but I think the MCL, ACL, just on the interior of the knee here,
Mm-hmm.
when I got down to in that position, I was like, I can't, it was a bad pain.
Yeah.
I mean, middle split sucks, but it's a pain
Yeah,
that's
you'll
reasonable.
know when
It's not like, it felt like a needle almost going into my knee.
If that does happen to you, it's the most important thing is to rest and rehabilitate. Prehab can go a long way with that, especially if naturally your joints just kind of suck.
Right.
But also, as you do the middle split, your knees will get stronger and more adapted to that. But there's always a balance between overdoing it. You know, a dosage, an important concept. You know, don't overdo it. You can hurt your knees if you do overdo it. But like I said, with loading it, 45 pounds, that's probably too much unless you got, bulletproof knees or you're Superman or whatever.
Exactly.
Oh, and you said one other thing. Actually, I wanted to make a point about how your hips hated it, and you always like with your feet not liking it. A big thing with the middle split is comfort, which is why I like to do it over carpet. If your feet are hurting, when you're doing it, like you're doing it on a hard floor, you're not going to get down very far. You have to be comfortable to a certain point. So, that's why I like socks and carpet the best.
Exactly. And I think that's just another point because it is really uncomfortable. It's just one extra variable you want to reduce. Yeah. And I know hardwood floors can have those little grooves in there, and if you're kind of either rubbing with it, it can kind of feel strange. So you do want to have comfort in this position because it just kind of sucks. Yeah. So then don't go the extra mile to make yourself eliminate the little things.
Yeah. It does go a long way.
That goes a long way, yeah. And I tried training on hardwood, and it's just I don't like it.
It's hard.
So
it's difficult.
It's painful.
Yeah.
And then, especially when you get to those last few seconds, you're about to drop. You just kind of want to. I love falling down on the carpet. I either fall down or slowly get back into kind of a straddle position. But on hardwood, you just can't do that as much. So for me, carpet is nice. And actually, I had one other point for the injuries. For when I had knee pain and when I had the hip pain, I never really did a whole lot of lower body training, other than just maybe hill sprints and biking. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my hip pain went away by doing a full range of motion squat just at 135 for reps. So whenever I was in the gym, I incorporated a light little leg day. I mean, my legs grow so fast, I don't really want to hit that many legs, but full range of motion squat, and that healed up my knees the first time. Then when my knee pain came back the second time, actually just running on the elliptical. I do that maybe once, twice a week, and I've had no issues. So I don't know if it's a lot of that or if it's part of the actual strengthening of doing the middle split, but if you have these things, just take care of yourself, don't overdo it, and maybe stick to something that strengthens your knee in a full range of motion.
Yeah, using your knees, in a less intense fashion is gonna help that out. Yeah.
Exactly. Cool, man. Well, is there anything else we need to talk about middle split?
I think it's an important goal to have, especially if you're like a break dancer or, something of that nature, or really anything. But
I think, absolutely.
I mean, it's really apparent to me in break dancers, middle split is like, they won't be flexible in many other places, but like middle split for them is like huge. So if you're a break dancer, that's pretty huge.
Yeah. You pretty much can't get flares unless you're unless you have a good middle split. And that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of want one, just because that skill is so cool. And I've trained it before, and it's just you're not gonna get it if you don't have the mobility. It's just not gonna. I mean, unless you wing it around, your knees are bent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that should be it. So if people are interested in signing up for some of your online coaching, where can they find you?
AmateurAcrobat.com. I'll probably put that up pretty soon. Otherwise, you can message me on Facebook. I do have a Facebook page for Amateur Acrobat. You can message me there. I'm also on Instagram. Just get in touch with me. My main things are Facebook, Instagram, and my website.
Cool, man. I think that's pretty much it, man. I think we covered some good middle split here.
I think we got a lot of info out there.
Exactly. Yeah, and if you guys are interested in more, Max is kind of the expert. I'm still working on mine, but yeah, hit him up and then come back, listen to me talk about shit. So I think that'll be it, man.
All right, cool.
All right, buddy.
See you later then.
Hey guys, that is it for the 29th episode of the Bauer Hour. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that as much as I did. I love talking to Max about bodyweight stuff. We chat pretty much once every day just about his website, my website, our movement practices, so we actually get pretty close, which is kind of random considering that we met on Instagram just by me doing a back lever. He threw a comment in there, and all of a sudden we just became great friends, so it's been awesome with him. Hopefully you also enjoy that middle split stuff. I mean, that's what the show is about. I know I'm having a lot of fun doing that. It gives me something to look forward to just because seeing these gains kind of unravel in front of me is really rewarding, and I just wanted to have an episode dedicated to those people that are interested in having a middle split. So that'll be it. You guys know where to find me. Facebook.com/The Bauer Hour Podcast, Twitter @The Bauer Hour Pod, and then my Instagrams are knowledge_is_Bauer. And then if you're interested in all my fitness stuff, that is @Sorta Gymnastics, SORTA. That'll be it, guys. See you next episode. Thank ya.